Hello, YouTubers and NFL fans everywhere. This is Matt, the NFL Fanatic, with my Week 13, 2014 NFL predictions. Well, last week, I had a very successful week. I went 12-3. So that's 80% of the games right, and now overall for the year, I am 114 and 61 and 1. So that equals up to about 65.1% of the games I've got right. That's a tremendous improvement for me, and with 5 weeks left, I definitely think I can get up to that 67, 68% that I would like. But we'll see what happens over these last 5 weeks. What an insane Week 12 in the NFL. So many great finishes, so many close finishes. Well, first of all, congratulations to the Oakland Raiders for getting their first win of the season. It definitely was a tremendous shock to me, because I don't think anybody expected the Oakland Raiders to win that game. I didn't. But I have to admit, Oakland played a very steady game. Oakland's defense is a bit underrated. They're better than I thought they would be. And Derek Carr, at the end of the game, proved that he can, take the next step and maybe be a franchise guy. True, he's only won 1 game in 11 starts, but he did more than Alex Smith could. And for Chiefs fans, I would say this. For Latavius Murray, a 6th-round pick, to run for 117 yards on 4 carries, and for Alex Smith to literally just throw to your tight ends and Jamal Charles, it exposed you guys as when you can't manage the game the way you would like to, you are not the premier team that I thought you would be. That everybody thought that maybe you weren't a pretender and you could actually put up a fight. Well, after the game against Oakland, I remember the headline in the Kansas City Star was Chokeland. And I definitely think that was appropriate because they choked away a tremendous opportunity for the team. But they are playing Denver, and they are in Kansas City where they've been a lot more dominant. So we'll definitely see what happens with that. I would also like to congratulate the Cleveland Browns for pulling off another cardiac cat-type win. I was really surprised that they had won that game because Brian Hoyer in that team did not deserve it. Brian Hoyer threw for 320 yards and 3 interceptions, and it was like the Falcons gave them the win because you can't give the Cleveland Browns 46 seconds and get them to about the 40, and then Hoyer just throws it to Gordon a couple times and they get enough for a field goal with 38 seconds left. That's how you manage a clock. But again, for Atlanta and the entire NFC South, which is one of the most pathetic divisions I have known in recent memory, this is probably the worst division, this is probably the worst a division has looked since the 2010 NFC West, which now a lot of people would say would be the best division, since everybody, for the first time in NFL history, is 3 games below 500, 3 or more games below 500 at this point. And with what happened with Atlanta, they're still okay, and they're still in first. Because even though they are 0-7 in the outside of the division, they're 4-0 in the division. So they have a huge tiebreaker over both Tampa, because they swept them, and they beat Carolina and New Orleans already. And that might be enough to do it. So I thought that was interesting. But also to kind of go back in the same token with New Orleans. New Orleans against the Ravens. They played another kind of New Orleans type game this year. Played very competitive. But they couldn't get the job done with Jimmy Graham getting a couple touchdowns. But I thought the main stop of the game was the goal line stand at about the 1-yard line to start the game. I would have taken the field goal just to put some points on the board because whenever you get the ball first, it's a great feeling to have. But Sean Payton was all cocky and said, let's go for it, and they missed it, and it gave the Ravens the opportunity to go down the field and score. And looking at how bad that defense is, I can't trust any of those teams to really win. And even Tampa, even though they lost to Chicago by 8 points, they're still in it, which amazes me. I want to give congrats to New England for their big win over Detroit. They have firmly placed themselves as the #1 team in the AFC and the #1 team in football. You can't have that dominant of a game against a Detroit Lion team that's been fairly consistent this year over other years and not be considered the best, even though Brady, again, he had a solid game. Tim Wright was the star of this game for 2 touchdowns, and that defense just smothered the Lions, and it was disappointing to watch. But kudos to New England, and they have a huge game. The game of the week to me against Green Bay, in Green Bay, and that could be a Super Bowl preview for all that I know. Let's see, a couple more things. The Bengals and Texans, a shame for Ryan Mallett to hear that he tore his pectoral muscle when he's out for the year. But at least it gets Ryan Fitzpatrick back in there, and I guess they're not leveling off that much from him. But now, can Ryan Fitzpatrick somehow try to guide this team to maybe a playoff berth, even though with their schedule left, I don't expect them to, because I don't expect them to get more than maybe 8 wins. But for the Texans overall, that would be a successful year to me, to go from 2-14 to 8-8 under Bill O'Brien. That's a good way to start off. And finally, I want to give credit to Denver for fighting a shootout with Miami. I did not expect that at all. And I had to give Miami credit. Their defense made some big plays, but at the end of the day, their running defense couldn't stop C.J. Anderson, and Peyton Manning was able to use his offensive weapons and pick them apart, even without Julius Thomas. I think Miami should not be ashamed with how their two of the last 3 games have gone, because they have been very competitive. I just think that now Miami's in a definitely desperate position, and they don't need to beat New England in a couple weeks, and don't need to beat New England and Baltimore after they play the Jets to really have a shot at maybe getting a playoff berth, because if they lose one of those 2, I think they're done. But that's that. So those are my thoughts on all last week's games. I'll get to other factors while I go through the picks. And now it's time for my picks. Tomorrow on Thanksgiving, when the 5-6 Chicago Bears go to the 7-4 Detroit Lions, I am taking the Detroit Lions. And then in the 4:30 game, when the 8-3 Philadelphia Eagles go to the 8-3 Dallas Cowboys to fight out for the number 1 team in the NFC East, I am taking the Dallas Cowboys. And then in the nightcap game, when the 7-4 Seattle Seahawks go to the 7-4 San Francisco 49ers, I am taking the Seattle Seahawks. And then on Sunday, when the 3-8 Washington Redskins go to the 7-4 Indianapolis Colts, I am taking the Indianapolis Colts. When the 2-9 Tennessee Titans go to the 5-6 Houston Texans, I am taking the Houston Texans. When the 7-4 Cleveland Browns go to the 6-5 Buffalo Bills, I am taking the Cleveland Browns. When the 7-4 San Diego Chargers go to the 7-4 Baltimore Ravens, I am taking the Baltimore Ravens. When 3-8 New York Giants go to the 1-10 Jacksonville Jaguars, I am taking the New York Giants. When the 7-3-1 Cincinnati Bengals go to the 2-9 Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I am taking the Cincinnati Bengals. When the 4-7 St. Louis when the 1-10 Oakland Raiders go to the 4-7 St. Louis Rams, I am taking the St. Louis Rams. When the 4-7 New Orleans Saints go to the 7-4 Pittsburgh Steelers, I am taking the Pittsburgh Steelers. When the 3-7-1 Carolina Panthers go to the 4-7 Minnesota Vikings, I am taking the Carolina Panthers. When the 10-1 Arizona Cardinals go to the 4-7 Atlanta Falcons, I am taking the Arizona Cardinals. When the 9-2 New England Patriots go to the 8-3 Green Bay Packers, I am taking the New England Patriots. And then in the Sunday night game, when the 8-3 Denver Broncos go to the 7-4 Kansas City Chiefs, I am taking the Denver Broncos. And then in the Monday night game, when the 6-5 Miami Dolphins go to the 2-9 New York Jets, I am taking the Miami Dolphins. Alright, time for my thoughts on each game. Chicago at Detroit. Again, this is always fun for Thanksgiving. This is one of Detroit's main opportunities to be on national TV, just like the Cowboys. And even though they have looked absolutely pathetic over the last 2 weeks, you do have to realize that they did play probably the 2 best teams in the league in the New England Patriots and Arizona Cardinals. And against the Arizona Cardinals, they did only manage the Cardinals to score 14 points. And even though they scored 15 points in the last 2 games, and that's 7.5 per game, which is not good. Matthew Stafford's been pretty pathetic. I think he went 19 of 46 against the Patriots. Calvin Johnson's been kind of a shell of himself. And it's really disappointing because when Calvin's on his game, that it definitely helps the Detroit offense move a lot better. but they haven't had Reggie Bush in the last couple weeks, and I wonder if his hamstring or his groin, I think it's his groin, will get better. Even through all that, I think this Detroit team will beat the Chicago team. Because even though Chicago has had a little bit of momentum with 2 straight 21-13 wins over the Vikings and Bucks, and that Bears defense in the second half of that Bucks game looked impressive, and Jay Cutler's had 2 of his better games this year, this Detroit defense is going to get after Jay Cutler. He's going to be knocked around. I think they can definitely stop Matt Forte's running game, and if they get enough pressure on Cutler, I don't think he'll be able to make plays. He'll make mistakes. He'll fall back into other factors. He'll fumble the ball. You know, he's pretty much, when they win games, he does not turn the ball over. I think it's like they're 4-0 when he doesn't turn the ball over, and 1-6 when he does. Or yeah, they're 3-0 when he doesn't turn the ball over. Yeah, they're 4-0 when he doesn't turn the ball over, and 1-6 when he does. And I expect it to happen against Detroit. Also, I just feel that Detroit has a better momentum. That defense, for the most part, is dominant. I don't expect Matt Forte to get that much on the ground. And if you really put the ball in Jay Cutler's hands, I can't trust him. Is Matthew Stafford going to have one of his best games? No, because I think Chicago's defense, it's a division rival. I feel like they're going to be motivated to play him. And Chicago is still fighting for something. But Detroit just came off last year when they beat Green Bay on Thanksgiving, a 9-year losing drought of losing on Thanksgiving. And I'm pretty sure they do not want to start another one or go 10 of the last 11 years losing on Thanksgiving Day. And looking at this Bear team, I know they have a little bit more motivation, and they might have a little bit more talent at the back end. And they have a better secondary match, or better receiver matchup with Marshall and them going against the Lions secondary. I just can't trust Jay Cutler enough in this offense to get enough where Stafford can't pull another comeback against this team, or Stafford will exploit Chicago's 30th ranked defense against Detroit's number, I think, 5 or 6 ranked defense. So it should be an interesting game, and I'm going to go with the Lions off those factors. Philadelphia, Dallas. This is one of the very entertaining games of the week. This is the first time that these two division rivals are going to meet this year. These are the only 2 teams in the NFC East that are really fighting for anything, and both these teams are both in the playoff hunt for their division and the wild card. Looking at Philadelphia, last week against Tennessee, it was another awkward performance. They did put up 43 points on the Titans, but 22 of them came from special teams and that beginning kickoff return by Josh Huff. Nicely done by the rookie. But besides that, Mark Sanchez only threw for 307 yards, but he had a touchdown and 2 interceptions. And so he only had 7 of those 42 points. The other 14 on offense were done by McCoy and Sproles. And LaShawn McCoy did run for 134 yards, but it was against the Tennessee Titans, who the week before gave up 207 to Le'Veon Bell. So, bravo for LaShawn. That big of a deal. But I look at this game, and I look at what Dallas did, and again, Dallas' defense got exposed by Eli Manning. I think Eli Manning, as he always does, he plays well against the Dallas Cowboys. He puts up good numbers, and he put up a 300-yard passing game, 3 touchdowns and an interception. And, of course, everybody's talking about that Odell Beckham catch, and what an incredible catch that was. But I'll get to that when I talk about the Jaguar game. But they were able to come back from an 11-point deficit to win that game on the road, and the Cowboys are 5-0 on the road. So you could say, well, Dallas might not win this one. They're at home. They're 3-3. They lost to Colt McCoy for goodness sake. They lost to Colt McCoy. But when I look at this game, I look at Mark Sanchez and I look at Tony Romo. I think the running games kind of cancel out, and I will say this, the Dallas Cowboys have a better offensive line. And I don't understand why Benny Logan went after the Cowboys offensive line saying, they're not that special. Well, when you have the number 1 running back in the league, your quarterback's been only sacked 20 times, and you basically almost lead in time of possession, that offensive line is better than just any offensive line. To me, it's the best offensive line in football. Anybody that has any disagreements, put that in the comments section. But I look at that and go, I think Dallas has more talent and more of a drive than Philadelphia does. I think if Romo and Sanchez get into this kind of battle, Romo will outduel Sanchez. Okay? And I think the only advantage Philadelphia has is that they have a better defensive line than Dallas does, because they have Connor Barwin, who's second in sacks, and they have Trent Cole and Cox and all those boys. But will they be able to get to DeMarco? I don't know. Will they be able to get to Romo? I don't know. I think Dallas, has a little bit more of a challenge. And also I think that Dallas has a lack in special teams. Because, again, the Philadelphia Eagles have scored 10 non-offensive touchdowns in the league, which puts them in the lead for that category. And the second team behind them only has 5. So if they can get some turnovers or get some blocked punts or get some kickoff returns and get free scores, that'll help Sanchez relax. But I don't expect that much to happen. I expect Dallas to be able to win this game off of Romo and his team. Okay, because they have the better offensive line, they have the better receivers, and they just have the better mindset, and they have more talent to work with than Chip Kelly does. And also, you think about it, Monty Kiffin, even though he's not the defensive coordinator right now, Rod Marinelli is, was the only team that Monty Kiffin could figure out would be the Philadelphia Eagles. Because remember, in the game against Philadelphia last year, all Eagle fans, you lost 17-3, and Nick Foles threw for a grand total of 80 yards. So I don't think that's going to happen this time. I think it's going to be a lot more competitive. But I trust Romo more than Sanchez in this regard, and I think that they're not going to get enough pressure for Romo not to be jittery and cause those mistakes. Because he had about 7 or 8 seconds in each one of those throws in that last drive, which really kind of concerns me for Philadelphia. So that's why I'm taking Dallas over Philadelphia. Seattle at San Fran. I'm taking the Seattle Seahawks in this one just because I feel that Seattle gained a tremendous amount of confidence back by beating the Cardinals, the best team in the league. Even though, again, I took the Cardinals last week, and it was a little disappointing to see them lose. But if you really look at the game, they held that Seattle offense to 4 field goals until about 1 minute into 1 minute left in the third quarter, where they got that touchdown off, and then they were able to hold them off the rest then. So I'm okay with that. If Drew Stanton throws for 146 yards and no touchdowns, you're not going to win a game like that. When Andre Ellington only runs for about 40 yards, Larry Fitzgerald's not in there, you're not going to win a game like that in Seattle. So, and I know they gained their confidence back, and I know San Fran, they've been kind of chugging along a little bit. They've won 3 or 4 in a row. And they've, over the last 2 weeks, they've played 2, 3, and 8 NFC East teams, and they beat New York by 6, and they beat Washington by 4. So, good for them for winning, but I'm definitely a little concerned, because if they're as good as you think they would be, that they should have played better. Seattle had a very consistent game over the Giants. They blew the Giants out, and they looked better against the Redskins than San Fran did. But I'm going to take Seattle just because I feel that San Fran's secondary is not that good. And I think even though Russell Wilson has less weapons to throw to than San Francisco does, I trust Russell to be more disciplined. He'll be able to run with his feet a bit more. And I just have that confidence in that he can do it. This team can do it. Will it be competitive? Yes, because if Colin Kaepernick can get some bombs off, or he can do what Russell can and he's more disciplined, there's definitely a better advantage. But when I look at this game, I feel that Seattle knows how to win these situations, and they are starting to gain that identity back that everybody knows them for from last year. San Fran, I don't know. You could look at San Fran's last few weeks and go, well, you barely beat the Saints, you barely beat the Giants, and you barely beat the Redskins. And that's something that might be concerning. And again, if you look at one of the games San Fran had against St. Louis, even though Seattle lost St. Louis as well, they blew that one. And it's definitely not that home field advantage that Candlestick is, that Levi's is. But I expect Seattle to win this game just based off their secondary and Russell Wilson being able to do enough against this weak Niners secondary with his feet and his arm to win the game. I think San Fran has a definite shot to win, and I think it might come down to a field goal. Just kind of like Philadelphia and Dallas. But I'm going to take Seattle off the secondary, Wilson's maturity, and Kaepernick not being able to make a big enough play to win the game. Washington, Indianapolis. Well, let me talk about this real quick. I've heard about the news, probably just like everybody here, today and the rest of the week, that Colt McCoy has been named the Redskins starter for the game against the Indianapolis Colts. I'm one of those people that actually have supported Colt McCoy getting this job because Robert has not been able to do anything in this offense at all. He is 0-4 as the starting quarterback when he finishes the game. Think about it. He only played 8 minutes of winning football the entire year. Kirk Cousins won a majority of that game against the Jaguars, and it was the Jaguars. And looking at Colt McCoy, again, in a vacuum, RG3 has a better skill set. He has a better arm. He might have more potential with his legs. But in this offensive system, Colt McCoy fits better than RG3 does. And I think that they made the right decision. For RG3, I think this is the end for him in Washington, because all Colt McCoy has to do, to me, is he needs to win a couple games here, and he can, but he just needs to play well. He needs to give the Redskins something that he throws about 260 yards a game, a couple touchdowns, and maybe a pick. That's good enough football. You could say, hey, he's doing a good job. RG3 over the last few weeks has not done that at all. In fact, this man has not won a game that he started in over 1 year. The last time he won a game was that overtime game against San Diego. Ever since then, he's lost all the games. He's been benched. He's missed 9 games. He's 4-14 as a starter. And it's almost Ryan Leaf-esque. And it's funny because he's playing the number 1 draft pick in Andrew Luck. And he's like Peyton Manning, where he's having a consistent career. And I look at it and go, does Colt McCoy maybe give the Redskins a little bit more of an edge? Yeah. Because, again, Indianapolis only doesn't have that much film to look at him for. But Indianapolis has a way better offense. And I think Colt McCoy, he will play well enough, but he won't beat Luck. I think Andrew Luck has a brilliant offense to go against this weak Redskins secondary. I think the Redskins defense can shut down their the Colts running game because they really haven't been able to do it. Or the Indianapolis Colts haven't been able to really run the ball that well this year at all. And I just don't see Colt McCoy being able to get this done against Andrew Luck. Even though, again, everybody thought, he couldn't do it against Romo, including myself, and he proved me wrong. So we'll see what happens. But I definitely think for Redskins fans, they should be, if for RG3 supporters, they have to realize that this maybe is the best for business decision. That you need to give Colt McCoy an opportunity to maybe prove that he can maybe be a quarterback for the Washington Redskins. I'm not saying he's a starter, but he's definitely playing for a roster spot on this team next year. Because I know Robert Griffin III, he's not going to get his 5th-year option where he's going to be due $18.3 million. He's not played anywhere near that level. So I expect Colt McCoy to do a little bit better, but with that Indianapolis team in Indy, where they've been at home, besides the game against New England, they've pretty much been dominant. And that's actually one of my 3 locks of the week. I'm going to go with Indy as a lock to beat Washington. Nothing against Colt McCoy, I just can't trust him against this hot Colt team. Tennessee at Houston. I'm going with Houston just because Houston just has a better overall squad. Kind of like the game a couple weeks ago against Tennessee. I don't really trust Tennessee. Even though Mettenberger over the last couple weeks has played pretty good ball. But their defense has been shredded by running games. And I think if Arian Foster or Alfred Blue, they should be able to do the same thing. Houston's team, for the most part, has played incredibly well. You look at what Andy Dalton did. He drew another pick 6 in Houston. That's almost his M.O. in Houston, Texas. And they know how to get after quarterbacks, and especially with how weak that offensive line is. I think Taylor Lewan went down in the game. I expect Zach Mettenberger to have another rough day. Remember, his first start a couple weeks ago was against the Houston Texans in Tennessee. And that's what I kind of see. I see that both teams really haven't changed. I guess Fitzpatrick played against them, and he won. So I kind of expect the same thing to happen. And that's what I'm taking Houston over Tennessee. Just I looked at what happened a couple weeks ago. Mettenberger played okay. I expect Mettenberger to play okay again. But he got smothered by the Houston defense. Fitzpatrick was able to make enough throws, and Arian Foster should be able to run enough. And that should be enough to win the game for the Texans. Cleveland at Buffalo. I am taking the Cleveland Browns based on the fact that Buffalo's offense, the last time they played a good secondary was the Miami Dolphins, and they only scored 3 field goals on that team. I'm not saying that they're going to do that bad because I think definitely with Deshaun Gibson going down for Browns fans, he was leading the NFL with 6 interceptions. That's a huge loss. But if you tell me to put Gilbert on Woods and Hayden on Watkins, I don't expect Kyle Orton to have enough offense. Okay? Remember, this is Brian Hoyer. He's going to have to try to build some confidence. And his line is facing the best, probably, pass rush in the league right now. They have 47 sacks already, which I think is leading the NFL. But they might already eclipse the 57 sacks that they got last year. And Jim Schwartz has done an incredible job. And I expect Brian Hoyer to be a little under the rest pretty much the whole game. But I expect Brian Hoyer, with the weapons he has, to be able to do enough to beat this Bill team. He can make throws to Josh Gordon. He has Terrence West and Crowell that can definitely run pretty consistent for him, even though that Buffalo run defense is no joke. But I just don't see Buffalo's secondary being able to stop Josh Gordon or this offense. And I don't expect Kyle, like, in this kind of game, Kyle won't be able to do more than Brian can. I think the running games are about equal because both run defenses, for the most part, have been pretty shut down for the most part. And in this kind of game, I just have to go with Hoyer wants a little bit of revenge due to what happened last year. Because remember, in Cleveland against Buffalo, he tore his ACL, so he's going to be a little more motivated with that. And I think with the rough conditions, I know that might give an edge to, with all the snow still around. I think that might actually give Cleveland the edge because I think their running game is a little bit better right now than Anthony Dixon and Fred Jackson for the Bills. I think this game is going to be very competitive because I think both teams can put up fights. But I'm going to go with the Browns because they have a better secondary. I expect Orton to do less than what Hoyer can. And Brian Hoyer needs to show this team that he can be the Brian Hoyer that we saw against Cincinnati or Pittsburgh, not the ones that we've seen against the Bills and the Texans and Falcons. So that's what I'm thinking, Cleveland over Buffalo. San Diego at Baltimore. I'm taking Baltimore in this one just because, first of all, Baltimore has won 5 of the last 7 games against San Diego. So they know how to beat this team. San Diego is going out onto the East Coast, and the last time they did that, they got shut out 37-0 by Miami. I'm not saying Baltimore's team is as good as Miami that day, because we don't nearly have a good enough secondary. But looking at what the St. Louis Rams were able to do, they were able to get a tremendous amount of pressure on Phillip Rivers, and if it wasn't for Shaun Hill throwing that idiotic interception, the St. Louis Rams probably would have won that game, or would at least certainly been able to tie that game, and I would have been right about that pick. But again, I digress. So I look at San Diego, and even though they've won their last 2 games, it took a idiotic interception and literally the Oakland Raiders not being able to do anything to win those last 2 games. Ever since then, they've lost 3 straight before that. They've only beaten Oakland twice in St. Louis out of their last 6 games. And even though Baltimore really hasn't had that much to do either, they looked incredibly impressive against the New Orleans team. Nobody really thought New Orleans would ever lose 3 straight at home. I didn't, even though I picked the Ravens to win, I was a little skeptical about it. But I think now that we are at home, they have not been able to beat us at home the last couple times. And just looking at how weak this Charger team is, because they can't run the ball. And Phillip Rivers with the weapons he has, Keenan Allen had 2 fumbles. I don't expect Rivers to be able to do enough against us to win this game. I think Flacco, he's going to have a little bit of problem with Brandon Flowers, but he should be able to get it to Torrey and Steve, and we should be able to run through that and be able to make enough plays, and we're just more disciplined. And I feel that in this kind of situation, the home field and knowing what San Diego lacks and what we have a strength in, which is their run defense and our running game, that's enough for me to take the Ravens team to win this game. I think San Diego has a chance to win it. Don't get me wrong. But I'm going to take Baltimore in this one. We can definitely shut down their running game, which they can't do. And I think even though Rivers is having the better secondary matchup, we'll be able to beat him with our running game. So that's what I'm thinking San Diego. That's what I'm thinking Baltimore to beat San Diego. The Giants over the Jaguars. Well, after what I saw with Odell Beckham, pretty much every fan has seen the catch of the year, and I have to admit, it was probably the greatest catch I have ever seen. just because of what it took for Odell to literally extend back with 3 fingers and grab the ball like a pen. It was 43 yards, and he didn't even step out of bounds. And I know people were telling me, oh, well, the David Tyree catch was better. In pressure situation, I will give you that. Because, again, that catch literally won the game for the Patriots. More so than the Burris catch. But for athleticism, I think most people would agree. That's definitely a heck of a lot more athletic catch than what David Tyree did. And David Tyree's catch, if you look at Robert Woods in the Monday night game, that's what Robert Woods did. So, I think it's the greatest catch I've seen. I don't know if it's the greatest catch ever. That's still debatable. But it's definitely the catch of the year for everybody's standard. But with that, I just got to take this Giant team. They looked motivated. They had a lot more fire in them. Eli Manning's playing a very bad Jacksonville defense. They gave the 70-yard bomb to T.Y. Hilton and to Andrew Luck. Even though, little side note for T.Y. Hilton, congratulations for having your child, little Gigi. And that was very cute to have a football cradle celebration. And I just don't have enough faith in Jacksonville. Blake Bortles will probably throw him a few interceptions. He's going to get knocked around a bit. They only scored 3 points against the Colts, even though through the first half, it literally was like 6-3. So I definitely think, with that giant offensive line, Eli Manning might get rocked around a bit. But knowing how good the Giants looked and how much talent they have compared to Jacksonville's, I can't take Jacksonville in this game to win. Just based off that. I think Eli Manning has enough weapons around him. He has Odell. They're going to abuse the Jacksonville corners. Everybody in the NFC East has beaten the Jaguars beside the Giants. So it would be pretty embarrassing for them to lose this. And I think with kind of lost seasons, the Giants need to get off the 6-game losing streak. And Jacksonville's the perfect team to do it because they really have nothing to go for. So that's what I'm thinking, the Giants to beat the Jaguars. The Bengals over the Bucks. This is my second lock of the week. I'm taking Cincinnati based on the fact that they just have more pure talent. Cincinnati, over the last 2 weeks, has played 2 very tough road games. And even though Andy Dalton hasn't looked his best, especially in the game against Houston last week, he's playing a Tampa team that just has not been able to win. Their secondary is horrible. They have been able to cough up the ball. When you're playing a defense like the Bengals and you can get a safety on Alfred Blue in the end zone. You can stop that running game to about 50 yards. And I don't expect Martin or Rainey or any of those guys to be able to do anything on offense. I think they might have an advantage with the receivers, but Dalton should be able to outplay McCown because Cincinnati just has to continue gaining some momentum. You can't beat the Saints and Texans in back-to-back road games and then go into Tampa and literally lay an egg. Because you look at what the Ravens did against the Bucs, we killed them. And I think Cincinnati, they could almost do the same thing. But I just, actually that's all I believe. That's why I have a lock on Cincinnati. I just have that much confidence that they can do the same thing. Tampa's offense is really anemic. Their defense is almost anemic. And it's almost a shame that they beat the Redskins and they beat the Steelers. Because for those 2 teams, you're looking at that Tampa team and going, how can you beat those teams? Or how could you lose to that team? But I'm going with Cincinnati again, just pure talent. Secondary can shut down the receivers, and Josh McCown will be able to do nearly enough to help this Buck team get a win against this Bengal team. Rams over Raiders. This was tough because I'm still a little frustrated with Sean Hill and the Rams, but I literally told myself that St. Louis has won 3 of their 4 games at home. They beat Seattle and Denver at home, and this is Oakland, and looking at that Oakland offensive line, even though they did a pretty good job against Kansas City's pass rush, St. Louis is a little bit better, and I just expect Sean Hill to have a little bit more play, a few more plays, and they're on that turf. And again, they've already beat Seattle and Denver on that turf. They should be able to beat Oakland on that home turf. And that's why I'm going with the Rams. Literally, it's kind of an even matchup. I think Hill has a little bit more of a veteran perspective, and I think they might have even a little bit better receiving core than the Raiders do. But I just go, St. Louis' pass rush is better than Oakland's, and I think Sean Hill should be able to redeem himself a little bit by making enough plays to win this game. That's what I'm taking, St. Louis over Oakland. New Orleans at Pittsburgh. I'm taking Pittsburgh because, again, New Orleans is on the road. After you go on a 3-game homestand and you lose every one of those games, that pretty much told me this same team is almost becoming the 8 team again. And looking at Pittsburgh, even though they have lost to Tampa at home, and they But I think that's it. They've only lost to Tampa at home. And besides that, you look at what they did against Cincinnati, or you look at what they did against Indy, 55 points. You look at what they did against the Ravens in that home game, 43 points. Looking at how bad the Saints defense is, Le'Veon Bell should have a career day. They should be able to run the ball down their throats, even though LeGarrette Blount being a Patriot, that might be a little frustrating because I think definitely a power back would be nice. But I just don't see New Orleans not being able to outscore the Steelers team. They're going into Pittsburgh, and their running game is almost non-existent. They had to use Joe Morgan, a receiver, who literally had the biggest run of the game. And after Mark Ingram had 3 straight 100-yard games, he only ran about 60 yards against the Ravens defense. I'm not saying Pittsburgh's a little bit worse, but I don't expect Mark Ingram to have 100 yards in this game. And just with those factors, I just can't trust New Orleans on the road. Even though, can Breeze beat up that Pittsburgh secondary? Absolutely, he can. Just like Vandenberger's been able to do, just like Hoyer's been able to do, just like a majority of quarterbacks have been able to kind of pass on the Steelers secondary. But I don't expect them to be able to stop Pittsburgh from scoring with how weak that defense is. So that's what I'm taking Pittsburgh to beat New Orleans. Carolina and Minnesota, this was awkward for me. I pretty much had to say that Carolina was on a bye. And if Cam Newton couldn't beat Teddy Bridgewater, if Cam Newton couldn't beat this Minnesota Viking defense, I just don't know what could happen. If Cam Newton can't beat Teddy Bridgewater and his team, even though he does, Teddy Bridgewater has definitely a more receiving core and maybe a little bit better of a secondary, I just expect Cam to win this one. He has to show somewhat that he can do something. Because if you look at what RG3 just went through, Cam Newton could be going through the same exact thing coming up after this year. I know Minnesota's at home, and they've already beaten Atlanta at home, and they look pretty solid against Green Bay, but there's just something in me going to Carolina, knowing what the opportunity they have, knowing that they're only half a game back, and looking at the rest of their division, they need to be able to beat this 4-win Minnesota team just to be able to tie with them. I don't really, have much anything else to say about the game. I would just say that Cam will show up, hopefully, against this Viking team and be able to do what Rodgers did. That's probably not going to happen, but that's my hope. So that's what I'm taking the Panthers to beat the Vikings. Arizona at Atlanta. Atlanta's 0-7 outside of the conference. Arizona has done pretty well this year. Matt Ryan won't be able to do anything against that secondary. Atlanta won't be able to run the ball, and expect Drew Stanton to do enough, or he can score enough points that their defense can handle the rest. Because remember, Atlanta has not won a home game since week 3. They've lost their last 3. They lost to Chicago, Detroit, even though that wasn't London, and they just lost to Cleveland. And they've lost the majority of their home games in the last 2 years. So this thing of Atlanta being in their dome, it's not the same thing. And just with talent, even with Fitzgerald out there, I think Michael Floyd could do enough against this weak Atlanta secondary. And Arizona should be able to win this game easily. And actually, that's my third lock. Would be Arizona beating Atlanta. And then let's see, three more to go. New England at Green Bay. This was extremely tough, and again, this is my game of the week. But I'm going with the Patriots, and I know what people are thinking. You could say, well, man, you're going with the New England Patriots to go into Green Bay and win. Have you seen what Green Bay's done this year at home? 5-0 at home. They've beaten, every one of their opponents by at least 30 points. Almost. Yeah, I see that. But Green Bay has not had to face a secondary like New England has. I expect Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb to have tough days against Revis and Browner. I don't think after those two, their wide receiver core drops a lot to guys like Devontae Adams or Boykin or other guys, Richard Rodgers, their tight end, or Corliss. They can't win the game for him. And even though Brady, he is playing against a Don Capers defense, which I look more impressive, he's used to this cold weather. They have Blunt and Gray should be able to come back from his benching. And I think they'll be able to run the ball enough and get enough play action to kind of expose the weaker Green Bay secondary. Because I don't trust the rookie safety Clinton Dix or Micah Hyde or Burnett or Williams to be able to stop this New England offense the way it's going. I think the game will be very competitive, and it probably could turn into a shootout. But with this kind of game, I think New England's secondary will hold enough over Green Bay's to win the game. Denver, Kansas City. I'm taking Denver. Denver put up 39 points on the Dolphins. Secondary, Kansas City just lost to Oakland. Even though Kansas City's a place, again, that's been very tough to win at home. Actually, the only team I think to beat them at home is Tennessee. That's it. So they've been pretty much dominant at home. But after what I just saw Kansas City do against the Raiders, I can't go against the Broncos on this one. It's just as simple as that. Can Kansas City's defense get after Manning? They could, because of how Payne's been playing. But I just expect Denver to be able to have enough offense to outgun Alex Smith. Because if Alex Smith's trying to win an offensive game, it's not going to happen. And then finally, Miami at the Jets. I'm taking Miami. The Jets just went back to Geno Smith, kind of like Robert Griffin III and Colt McCoy. That's a disaster. Miami's secondary will shut down that weak offense systematically, and you almost could have another game that what the Bills did. That's pretty much what I have. And the Jets, Rex Ryan's gone, and I feel bad for Vic because he only had 3 starts where Geno had about 7. So, and again, Miami's offense, they should be able to do enough against this Jet team. The Jets have no offense at all. They could actually shut them out with how bad that Jet offense looked on Monday night. So those are my thoughts and all my picks for this week. Like, comment, rate, subscribe. If anybody has any questions or any other points that maybe you'd like to talk to me about, put it in the comment section. I'd love to hear from people. And to everybody out there, happy Thanksgiving. And Thanksgiving is a great time to enjoy the 3 F's for the holiday to me, which are family, food, and football. That's what Thanksgiving is meant to me pretty much every year. And I think it's going to be very exciting. So everybody, enjoy their Thanksgiving and be safe. Good luck to all players. Good luck to all teams. Good luck to all fantasy players. And good luck to all fellow prognosticators. And until after the holiday, this is Matt the Fanatic signing off. Till then, happy Thanksgiving. All of you guys travel safe to wherever you're going or enjoy the time. And see you next week. So this is Matt the Fanatic signing off. So long.